Joining us now is Steve Quayle. Thank you, Steve.
Wow, David, good. It's really nice to be on with you because Jade Helm, I think, needs to be put in the larger context. This is the first time in history that a 2-month-long operation is going to be focusing on the American public. We know that the same tactics that are being proposed for the exercise to take place between the hours of midnight and 4 or 5 in the morning is exactly what the special operations troops did prior to the bombing of Iraq and all of our different Middle Eastern ventures, whether it's Afghanistan. In other words, you move the special operations community in prior to an event. Now, remember, I want to take everybody back to Larry Grathwohl in his book, No Place to Hide. If people remember, he was the one that penetrated the weather underground when Bill Ayers and 24 other elite from Ivy League trained schools were talking about the necessity in the early 70s of killing 25 million Americans, and prior to the killing of them, moving them into detention camps for re-education. Now, I know, David, that you've read his stuff, but here's the larger context. I think that people are being tied up with the events or the implementation of how they're going to round up people and kill them, and they're forgetting the idea that when Bill Ayers was making this comment, he was deadly serious. Now, I've just taken the population density at that point in history, moved it into our point in history, and the numbers I've heard from special operations, active duty generals in the past, contemporary military and intelligence agents, is they're up to 80 million to 100 million people. So I think if people put it into context, notice a change. Notice a change when Middle East terrorists became obviously embraced by this administration. Now, that's the context. I think that people have got to understand that context, David, because what we're talking about is not an exercise. When the local police are told to stand down and not respond to gunfire, by the way, it's a live fire exercise. When we've seen massive YouTube videos, you guys at Infowars.com have led the charge in showing all the videos coming into you from all over the country. People are now starting to get it. And the point that I want to really get across to everyone today, and thank you for taking this hour out of your time to interview me, is this. This is the full-scale implementation of the red, the blue, and the green list. The red list are people. Now, do you remember, David, and I'll let you obviously respond because that's just my intro, the days years ago when gun owners' homes are being GPSed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we warned about that. And we tried to get people to understand. I was literally in my front yard in right at a mountain community at the base of the mountains in Bozeman, Montana, when the guy came up with his GPS unit and his bicycle and came literally to my front door. And I watched. The reason I didn't challenge him at the time, I wanted to see. To the left of me were leftists, to the right of me were leftists, and I wanted to see if they even got GPS. Absolutely not, okay? So I watched. This is not a report. Well, we heard massive reports of that happening. And the deal that people have got to understand is this, that with the implementation of the red list, the blue list, and green list, that was given to me almost 20 years ago, actually before that, about how it would be implemented when they were ready to make their move by the former head of the Environmental Protection Agency, who was murdered for the Western United States. So that wasn't just, quote, internet talk, and obviously that at that point the internet was just in its beginnings. But I think it's important that people have got to understand that this explains everything. It explains the Chinese, it explains the Russians, it explains the North Koreans, and it explains the assault coming on the United States from Mexico. Remember when we broke the story? I think Alex had me on to talk about the Chinese troops. You guys verified it below the border.
Yes.
And then the thing that people have got to understand is that this is the plan. So when I say don't lose track of it in perspective, I want to just make one sentence and I'll give it back to you. In No Place to Hide, I call him Grathwohl, maybe it's Grathwohl, explains that the weathermen actually believed that they would be successful in overthrowing U.S. government, and that with the help of the Cubans, Chinese, Russians, and North Vietnamese, they would occupy America. Now remember, this is during the Vietnam War. Americans would have to be re-educated in camps similar to what communists did in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and other countries that they had taken over. And then here's one of the most chilling revelations. I asked, well, Grathwohl speaking. Well, what is going to happen to those people we can't re-educate that are diehard capitalists? And the reply is they'd have to be eliminated. So, David, that's the context of what we see. The American people, as Alex has pointed out, as you've pointed out, as the, going on day after day, hours after hours, have become the enemy. And now in the face of basically nuclear tension, and for the record, I used to write about nuclear weapons and their effects and during the Cold War years, and civil defense and all that stuff. So as I look back on the perspective, we have seen the absolute taking apart of our military, our top flag officers and generals fired, any battlefield experience, and we've seen complete redirection of funds from foreign enemies to the internal enemies. And I've read on the air the letter that was sent in those days by, I believe it was either Janet Reno or Napolitano to the Russians requesting their help and the foreign troops. So you can't deny it any longer. People used to poo-poo black helicopters. They used to poo-poo Russian troops, Chinese troops.
Well, of course,
I think,
exactly. We've had the article we put up over the weekend that Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones put together, listing all the many times that they have defined who their domestic enemies are. It's not just what Larry Grathwohl is saying. We've been seeing this coming from the administration. We've been seeing it coming out of the military academies and other think tanks that are associated with the military. We saw it coming out of the MIAC report. You're talking about the red list, the blue list, and the green list. Break that down for the audience.
The red list are the primary target for the New World Order in the United States of America when the order is given. The lists already exist, and again, according to, and I want to make this clear, I cannot know this stuff unless people tell me. Just like Alex gets tips, you get tips, David. There are people out there that genuinely love their country. So that's how I got this. A red list are primarily firearms owners. They are constitutionalists. They are people who have been politically active in resisting the New World Order. And those are the people that are their targets. And let me make this clear. They're not coming to take the guns away. They're coming to terminate, exterminate, blow away the gun owners. Again, special operations teams are not sent in to take prisoners unless it's a high-value target for a later date. They basically are trained to go in and just obliterate, okay? Now, again, when I get told this by a four-star general, active duty, and by the way, you guys have more probably active duty spec ops and spooks in Austin than any other city in the United States of America. You probably know that. If you don't, I will tell you that. And the thing that's fascinating to me, David, is the red list basically goes down the first 30 days, okay? So let's say they've increased it to 60 days. Well, they're combining now two different events. Now, the system that's been set to communicate with law enforcement from the Department of Homeland Security is a pretty secure system now. They can lock out individual officers from being able to hear the general alerts. They can punish or they can terminate. Now, these are really hard statements for people to understand. Quick anecdote, 30-second version. Chief of detectives in a major metropolitan city heard me on, I think it was one of the interviews Alex and I were doing a couple years ago. He didn't think I was basically upfront with the information until a foreign observer was assigned. I told him what to look for. The foreign observer knew everything about his family, his children, when they went to school, how much money he made. He knew everything, and he rode along in the back of two detectives' cars. And the interesting thing is I got a call from the individual probably a week later, and he said, "You're right. This is going down just exactly as you said." Well, I wasn't the originator of that. The blue list are law enforcement, National Guard, and anybody who's contributing to the execution and the takedown of the red list. 30 days to 60 days after that, those guys get wasted. Now, I don't know what word you would use, David, but they're murdered. They're killed.
Yeah.
Now, where have we seen that in history before? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the Navy SEALs that got bin Laden, right?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
And so, as a matter of fact, before we went on this show, I was contacted by a Navy SEAL overseas, and he said, "Steve, I cannot believe what's happening to the country I love," and was ready to lay down my life for. He said, "It's like a pall, if you will, a blanket of darkness has settled over the country and people can't see. What's happened, David, is one of the things that I've really tried to do in talk radio and all the stuff I've written and the interviews I've done, 9,000 plus hours, is to get people to understand you've got to understand the root of evil, because everything else is an offshoot of evil. May I speak? I'll give you one more interview that took place recently with a personal friend of mine, known to me, who met with various generals, retired, and what they told him was simply this, is that it is going operational. Now, this is generals. This isn't make-believe. This isn't scuttlebutt. This isn't internet rumor, okay? And the gentlemen just happened to be at the top of their hit list.
We got to go to break, Steve. Hang on. We're going to come right back. And, you know, quite frankly, it's kind of like the couple that drove the car off the GPS bridge. How many signs do we need before we start to pay attention? If it isn't happening now, it's going to be happening very soon. We're breaking down, Steve was breaking down for us the red list, the blue list. We haven't gotten to the green list yet, but Steve, just before we had to go to the break, you started talking about a source that you had and who thought this was going to be operational. Tell us what he said. Start that over again for people who are just tuning in.
Former Green Beret had a meeting with retired generals and high-ranking former enlisted men who were very concerned because the friend of mine that had the meeting was asked to come to the meeting because supposedly there was a Pentagon memorandum put out about some of the people in this country that they are forbidden to listen to. He happened to be one of them. Alex happened to be one of them. I happened to be one of them. Hawk happened to be one of them, and Doug Hagman happened to be one. There were two other guys that he couldn't remember their name, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, and I don't know it or I'd tell it. Here's the issue. The issue is, David, that the American people must understand that the sheer placement of the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, troops on the streets, and everything else is indicative. Now, let's talk about Jade Helm, the name. May I do that?
Yeah, sure.
The simply are the people that they go into re-education and are assimilated. They get to live, but they get to live as perpetual drones or techno-serfs at the behest of the New World Order. The thing that is really critical for people to understand is that Jade Helm's name, Jade is always associated with China. It has nothing to do primarily with the Middle East. It has everything to do with the Far East. If I tell you the captain's at the helm, that means he's steering the ship. That means that he is the one who's in charge of the direction. One of the Chinese demands upon the United States government was the fact that they needed to disarm the American public. You remember that story when it came out that China absolutely demanded that the American public be disarmed?
Yeah, I remember that was kind of strange, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's always something behind that. It's kind of like when the UN came out and said, you need to shut down Colorado and Washington State. The federal government needs to shut that down because we have a UN drug treaty. And, of course, it was the UN that set up the schedule for the war on drugs 10 years before Nixon declared the war on drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what's important is everything's in a name. Now, look, it's not lost in the financial markets that China has amassed the world's largest gold hoard, and this has everything to do with the name Jade Helm 15. Obviously, 15 can relate to the year that it's going to be implemented, as in this year. China is going to make an announcement at some point, and we're seeing it with the AIIB Bank. We're seeing it with the nations abandoning former allies. It doesn't matter if it's Australia, doesn't matter if it's Britain, it doesn't matter who it is. Everyone's going to China because basically it's a truism, a maxism in the world that he who has the gold makes the rules. One of the things the bankers have been able to do is to transfer the gold that was in the United States. It's irrelevant if there's anything in Fort Knox. I'm here to tell you that there's nothing there. The point being is that China, with its 30,000 plus tons of gold, by the way, the World Gold Council is totally inaccurate in the country's gold holdings, just they're wrong. Russia, for instance, has right now in excess of 10 to 15,000 tons of gold. So the point is, let me make this clear. Jade Helm may be the orchestration and the introduction of the Chinese yuan or renminbi in a gold-backed or commodity-backed form.
At that point, the dollar will lose value almost overnight, if not become worthless. My guess is, just quick and dirty, it goes down 50% in a matter of days and then another 30%. Well, that's not going to make anybody happy in the United States. The point being is that the riots will be generated. Now, here's something people need to do. Go to the root of the problem. You'll understand the fruit and how it will be implemented. In order for the communist revolution to take place, they want to engender civil war. I've been saying that. Alex has been saying that. And by the way, obviously with the Mayak report and others, when the veterans were vilified, any man or woman who has served in this country, any official capacity, had to note that this man's military, and I've never been in the military, but that's what a lot of them call it, has changed so dramatically. And it's fascinating to me that even yesterday or the day before, I may be off a day, but the President of the United States has now declared they want to cut back the military pensions. At the same time, there's unlimited amounts of money to purchase billions of rounds of ammo, MRAPs, the police department who have been militarized. So here's what I'm saying.
When you're talking about that, Steve, I think it's very interesting that it was just last summer that the Pentagon announced that they were going to stop giving equipment to fire departments. This was something that they have been doing since right after World War II, giving equipment to small rural fire departments because they can't afford very much, and they're the ones who have to deal with the really large fires. And so they shut that down. It stayed shut down for about a month, but there was a lot of pressure from the firemen, from congressmen and senators. They got that restarted. But that was happening at the very same time they couldn't get enough equipment quickly enough into all these small towns for law enforcement. They only wanted to give equipment to people who had the power and the authority to arrest. That was going to be what they were going to do it for, not to the fire departments. They wanted to completely shut that down.
Well, and you're correct. So the point is that, in essence, all the fire departments, any authority figures that with the power to arrest, and by the way, everybody, as you know, has been given the power to arrest now, from IRS agents to remember when the Forest Service Rangers never wore weapons. I can tell you from watching them, I take a lot of photographs, and in the national parks, and now you would swear that you would declare freely. You can't believe how weighted down those guys are with weapons in their car, AR-15s and shotguns.
And of course, you shouldn't worry about the fact that they got billions of rounds of hollow point bullets, which the military doesn't even use. You shouldn't even worry about that. As we got all the pushback, they would look at the small purchases for some of these organizations, say, well, that's just for target shooting. But it's $3 billion. They would take the very smallest ones and they would push back against that. But we won that fight.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. You know, we become responsible then for administrating, you know, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. Now, I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Here are your coffins, which you paid for with your tax money. There are millions of them waiting for you in different states across the country. Each coffin can hold 3 or 4 people, and most of you will be crammed into one right after martial law is declared in America. Their goal is to kill 90% of the world's population, so they can better control the rest of us, and they will start in America.
The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous, that he cannot believe it even exists. And we tell people about it, and they say, you're crazy. And they say, you're crazy. This is America. It can't happen here. This conspiracy is so monstrous, so demonic.
Here's one of FEMA's projects. 500,000 body casket liners. The second location of 2, this one here in Covington, Georgia, at my back doorstep. 1.5 million on the same track line. Right here follows all the way down to Madison and into Atlanta. Down to Madison and into Atlanta.
Okay, we're here in Madison, Georgia.
A van pulled alongside of me, and it turned out to be the property owner. I asked him about the field of black boxes, what were they? And his statement was, and he says they're disposable coffins.
We're just getting an idea for the size of these boxes. What could these boxes be used for? Well, they're called casket liners. And that's an interesting term, isn't it? It's a casket liner. When I first heard the term casket liner, I thought perhaps a lining for a casket. But this is too big to be on the inside of the casket. So certainly this could be used as a casket. This is an inexpensive casket. And you can see the size here. There's lots of room. I think my friends here, we could all probably get inside. It might be a little cozy, but we'd fit just fine. Which tells me that these liners can be used for more than just one.
What they call a red or blue list. Those on the red list will be woken up at 4 a.m. and taken to the camp and probably killed. There's concentration camps. They're not telling you anything. They're just filling you with the airways, and Satan is the principality of the powers of the air. They're going to just continue to program you until they wake you up and make you go to your train stations. They're not telling you this. Your preachers are not telling you this. When they declare martial law, they will use a preacher to guide you to the train and tell you to follow your government. That's what's about to happen, man. And because you trust your preacher, you're going to follow him to your death. Christ spoke of these camps. Christ spoke of those that would follow him would have to go through persecution at the end. Now don't say it can't happen, because after Jewish people, can this happen?
I've had people calling me saying they go out to their mailbox and they find a little red dot or a little blue dot on their mailbox, and they wonder what the little red dot, blue dot is. Well, it's marking your mailbox by the government, so when foreign troops come in here on us after martial law, if you have a red dot on your mailbox, they take you out immediately and shoot you right in the head. But if you have a blue dot, they take you to the FEMA camps being built by Halliburton right now to house 50 million Americans, to put those with the blue dot on your mailbox in those concentration camps. Now, if you go out and you find a pink dot on your mailbox, that means that they believe you'll be a good slave and you're going to go along with the program and serve our international Antichrist masters.
What you see with people is that they're desperate to hear what they want to hear. They're desperate for people to say, oh no, this conspiracy theorists, they're all crazy, they're all paranoid, it's not really going on, it's ridiculous. And this is done to protect you. This is done for you, we're the government, we care for you. This is why we're doing it. So you go to sleep, watch the telly, there's a game on in a minute, and you'll be fine. and we're just going to build another concentration camp. See it? And we're just going to build another concentration camp.
Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18. He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or forehead, that no man might buy or sell, save he that the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that's understanding count the number of the beast, for the number of a man is number 666, the infamous 666.
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers. The whole agenda is to create a one world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. RFID chip implanted in them.
Once again, microchip implants viewed as the end of privacy in the United States. And called, this is interesting, an RFID chip, like those used to track products and identify lost pets via low-power radio waves. The federal government has made it so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark of its national ID. Thank you, Tim O'Brien. Do you recognize that? No one can buy or sell.
Oh,
Jack,
man.
that's exciting.
Near we are to the coming of the Lord. Near we are to the coming of the Lord.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that.
A chip the size of a grain of rice could save your life.
To think something so small can connect you to everything that matters.
When your life and all you love are on the line.
On this Tuesday in February, states north and south, east and west, what began as a whisper in Springfield has swelled to a chorus of millions calling for change. It's a chorus that cannot be ignored, a chorus that cannot be deterred. This time can be different because this campaign for the presidency of the United States of America is different.